All right. For our first panel today, we have Kshitij Sachan, the lead process and leadership coach of Keka, our moderator for the day. Moving on, our first speaker actually for the day is Mr. Prosenjit Mukherjee, who is the CHRO of SRK Consulting Group. I would like everybody to please give a huge round of applause for all our speakers. Next up, we have Mr. Arun Kumar Das, the Global Head of Learning and Customer Experience at Sutherland. Please come on stage. And everybody talks about, the Bangalore traffic and stuff, but Mumbai really, precedes that. Truly, Mumbai has the worst traffic ever, which is why our third speaker is stuck in the traffic. And when he comes, he'll be joining us, right? So over to you, Kshitij.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Having a good time? Hello. All right, good to see a lot of familiar faces.
We should be on a merry-go-round.
Well, the stage is tricky, so please don't mind. While I speak to this half of the crowd, I'm not sure what the other half sees, but live with it, please.
So you're safe. Your back is covered, so don't worry.
Thank you. Works. Everything works. So all right. So coming back to the core agenda of why we are here, right? So speed teaching is the concept, and we'll try to bring upon as much experience and learning into the next 30 minutes in this discussion. I'll start with my introduction for the people who do not know me. I am Kshitij. I'm a performance coach at Keka. So ideally, my work, if I explain, I help organizations design talent management processes. If you look at employees, their performance or their productivity inside the organization largely depends upon three frameworks. One is the goals, which is the set of responsibilities that people need to take care. And eventually the competencies, which are the set of skills that people require to get those goals, right? And third, the values, right? Which kind of defines how the organization is going to behave or how the people are going to behave with people inside the organization or outside. So essentially, these frameworks are not that easy to crack, and I think all of us from being from HR understand that side of the pain. So I've been helping organizations in designing those, these frameworks and evolving them into something where you can actually scale to succession plan and, defining better jobs inside the organization. So, the topic, how many of you know the topic of the panel? Anybody knows the topic of the panel? Yeah, please go ahead. Perfect. So the topic is that how do we get compliant? And so I'll take a couple of minutes. Let me start with a small story of how did we come across compliances in our life for the first time. So I joined Keka in 2016, and it was like, we were like 5 people sitting in a room, imagining that, we really needed a software which can actually, we had another entity of 300 people, and we actually required a good software to manage those set of people, and the amount of compliances that were there, again, it was very difficult. So multiple penalties happened on us, and that's where the need of the software came. So essentially, if you look at it, any business, right, out there, every business, once it starts with the founder itself. And that founder has a very clear sense of the vision and the mission of the business, right? They have a very clear sense of purpose that, whatever they do, why they are doing it. Eventually, if you look at it, when people start joining the organization, they also come with their own set of aspirations. Some might have aspirations of learning, some are there to make money, some are there to find sustainability. The entire Maslow hierarchy of needs, we see it happening in our floors every day, right? So essentially, again, so there is a gap. There's a gap what organization aspires and what an individual aspires. And that's where we started realizing that, there has to be a way to really bring in a consensus in terms of what needs to be done. And that's where the entire journey of building an HR tech, which can actually get all the people practices in one singular pace, defining employee experiences through technology came into existence, and that's what the journey has been so far. Today we talk about Keka. We currently serve more than 10,000 businesses around India with the all modules kind of a feature where, from time and attendance to payroll and all of that we can take care. So again, why this context? I will give a small brief of it. So we as a business where we have close to 1.5 million users of our platform on a daily basis, we see that most of the utilization of the product happens on the compliance side. One of the biggest reasons for organizations to invest into Keka is because of the compliances itself. We want to take care of all the complexity that lies with the payrolling of people. So essentially, that actually gave us the essence that we should actually talk on this topic itself, because while people are really choosing to buying the software to do it, definitely there is a need to do it. So Prasenjit, I'll come to you, right? So with reference to you, I made certain notes. One thing was like you are currently in the process of setting up multi-country shared services and onshore operations at SRK. So while you set up any business, that's the best phase to learn about the compliances also, right, for as a business. So essentially, could you help us understand that what needs to be done by a 0 to 1 organization, which is just getting started, how to, we go about doing compliances for them?
Okay, thanks, Kshitij. I'll be a little childish. I'll try to roam around here so that it's a little odd, because we typically, as HR, sit and then it's a not very conventional stage. Anyways, so first thing first, to start any business, to set up, especially compliance, labor laws, employment laws are very important, as we know. And very important step for everyone. So what we do typically is that every organization that I have seen also, in generally have labor law consultants that they work, right? They advise us on legal aspects of various law. They have CRM that they follow. They have platforms that they follow. I have a different view. I would say that we also should get into due diligence of labor law experts. Now, what happened in my experience when we were setting up various countries, Canada, Philippines, US, we set it up. So when we were setting up the labor laws platforms, even in India, India is more complex. What we found out is that many things that are coming from the labor law consultants are in a predefined manner. So laws are always gray, and laws are always gray, and there are many other items. So for HR, it is very important that we first know what are all the various legal regulations, what are the various legal aspects, what are the various laws, what are the various acts. So you can start from shop and establishment to, Minimum Wages Act, to various acts that are there, right? But we study those acts in India. Similarly, for global operations, we need to study that act, right? Understand what all minimum regulations of those acts that need to be followed. If we just listen to a labor consultant or a labor law company, they will probably jot down 10 points, and we will just go to the business head and say that, okay, this is the labor law. And they'll say, we don't want, हमें नहीं करना है, आप हमको तो business संभालना है, हम क्या लेके आ गए हो as an HR? Okay, so it becomes very difficult. So you need to be convincing. So first we understand, as HR, we study, we do our own due diligence. And when I say due diligence, हम खुद जाके वो Bear Act पढ़ते हैं. We should read about it, every section of it, right? Where all the gray areas are there, what all it is mentioned, why it is mentioned, this section, what are the various sections of the act, okay? Why we are giving it. For example, I'll give an example. So in India, typically we always provide annual leaves. Some says privilege leaves, right? Your shop and establishment says that one has to be 240 days in a company in the Shop Act, and subsequent year they get one leave, annual earn leave on 20 working day. So we give it in advance. But that guy, if I just go ahead and copy paste that thing, so business head would say, why should we follow, right? So we need to understand how you're going to represent. So one is that interpretation of the law is very important. Learning of those laws, those sections are very important. How we are putting it up for safeguarding the interest of the company is very important. If we are putting it up in a way where we say, okay, this is the law that needs to be followed, is going to be a challenge. Rather, we should look at, if we are not following, what are the financial implications that the company would follow. So the business will then listen to it, because there is a finance involved to it. मैं तो ऐसे ही करता हूँ, मैं जब भी कुछ मनाना होता है तो मैं एक थॉरो स्टडी करता हूँ, कॉस्ट बेनिफिट करता हूँ, बोलता हूँ सर ये है, खर्चा इतना आएगा अगर नहीं फॉलो करते, एंड दे फॉलो इट. दैट्स हाउ आई डू इट. And for global region also, I study it thoroughly, section by section, read by read, book by book, one line by line I thorough it. That is how I at least do it. I am not sure others, but I do it every law, every section, whenever we set it up. This actually helps us to understand various nitty-gritties of labor context, be it employment contract, be it safety, health and safety regulations, be it minimum wages, be it various global contexts. India is very complex. There are many, many gray areas. Internationals are very simple. In fact, the government have set up websites where you can, Ministry of Manpower, you go to the Ministry of Manpower website, you will learn to it. Indian governments are very complex. I mean, not that way, but again, the laws are very complex, so you have to learn through it. This is my two piece. Yeah, thanks.
Right. Laws are complex and at the same time very dynamic, which is a nightmare for us
Right.
as
So
a
in the
technology.
meantime, I would just like to request Mr. Harjeet Khanduja to take the stage. A huge round of applause for Mr. Harjeet Khanduja, ladies and gentlemen.
Good to have you here, sir.
Mr. Khanduja is the Senior Vice President, Human Resources at Jio, and who would be continuing the conversation on becoming compliant.
Look, I am not late. We just wanted to give you an experience how a non-compliance looks like.
Great one. So, Harjeet sir, I'll come to your question a little later. So, it's Arun turns for the question he has been waiting for. It's Arun, my question to you. You take care of the learning side of the business, right? And there is a lot of importance when it comes to training leaders in terms of, they need to be compliant, right? These founders, it does not naturally come to them. While you chase your dreams, your aspiration, it is not something which is in your mind. You simply look at your goal and you want to go after it. But again, government also has a vision, right? So, for which the law comes in. So, what trainings would you recommend to a 0 to 1 organizations to go with for the leaders? And the other aspect is that how do we measure, the outcome of those trainings?
Sure, thank you. I'll take a leaf from what Prasenjit was talking about. In an Indian context, it is totally different than when you look at a global implementation of compliance. It's very different, right? It's easier that way. The reason being, in India, it is difficult to tell a monitor how to behave in a classroom, right? And that's exactly the problem when we're talking about leadership, whether it's in a startup environment or an established organizations. So my two bits, I've worked on startups as well as tech companies. Now I'm part of an ITS, an IT company. The big learning that I've had is you do not make policies or the norms outside of the local policies. Those need to be contextual. So I'm sure Harjeet would reckon with me on that. It's called globalization. So it's a global localization of any policy or anything that you work with, right? The second part of it is how do you make sure that people understand that? So training is a widely abused word, and we have started talking about learning, right? When it's learning, it's my responsibility. Training is somebody else's responsibility. Let me be very clear on that. Right, so when you talk about learning, so you do not make people go through pages and pages of document. That doesn't work. I remember my first job about 25, 26 years back. There was zero effort on compliance. They gave me a file, they said, read about it, right? And guess what? I had no idea what I was reading. I just eyeballed them and I said, I'm done. And I could remember the keywords when the assessment came in. And yeah, boom, I was done. It's only later on when I went to implement them, did I go to the councils and the HR guys to figure out whether it's in the right direction or not. So today's context, you have 4 generations which are working under the same roof. Now in that, the content consumption itself it differs from generation to generation. That is one angle to it. The second angle to it from a learning perspective is that any generation can learn in a different way from the prescribed method. And I'll just take a step back and explain what I just said. Sounded very interesting, it is not, and very complex, right? And that's what we are supposed to do. We are trained to do. Learning guys are supposed to make their job very, very crucial when it's not. You guys do your jobs, we are not required. Having said that, let's say Gen Y today, Gen Y and Gen Z, right? Their content consumption as far as the social content is concerned is micro-learning, right? And when I say micro-learning, anything with between about 7 to 15 seconds. And that's exactly why. How many of you are on Instagram, if I may ask you? How many of you are not on Facebook? Not on Facebook. I won't ask the third question, which I asked recently in Cairo. How many of you don't use TikTok? You can't, the government has banned it. So why did I ask you this? Now imagine you have some free time and then you're going through reels, right? And I have a lot of, in my feed, I have a lot of reels on cooking because I love food, right? And anything which extends beyond 10 to 15 seconds, I swipe it up. Right? That's the normal philosophy, that's the normal behavior that we have. Having said that, is that what you would do when you are learning at workspace? So when you are going through your compliance training, is that what you do? You don't, right? Most of us, what we do is go over the same sentence, the same paragraph over and over again. Statistics says that it's about 3 times. And there is a reason to it. Why? First time, we are visually aligning that content to our mind. Second, we are contextualizing, and then we are thinking of events when we have seen something like this. And the third time is when we are implementing and we are learning what to do. And that's when we are catching the keywords. So there are 2 different kinds of content consumption that I just talked about. And that's exactly what happens. So today, if you have the content delivered in one manner, it will never work, right? So there has to be a video content, there has to be a self-learning, there has to be a check for knowledge or check for understanding, and the final thing is application. Now, when you create content on compliance, right, it needs to be very contextual. You can't make a theoretical content anymore. What you need to do is create a content which is right now, right here. In my industry, this is exactly what happened. And this is what is the norm. And the third thing that you do is, if you don't follow X, then what happens? Right? If this, then what? That kind of a theory is what is applicable. So the learning has to be very personalized. I have to feel that it is personalized. Learning has to be very in the moment, and it has to be practical or contextual to my work. Forget about my domain, my industry, my organization, my function and my role in the organization. That is how personalized the learning has to be. So I'll just state a last point. Now, when you talk about Indian laws, right, in multiple spaces, and I was just having a discussion with Vishal some time back, in terms of the new norms that the government of India is bringing in. The PII part has been the first one that came in the US. Then GDPR came in Europe. And we're just talking, the Indian government's current norm is possibly a replica or an inspiration from GDPR, right? If you take that, and like Prasenjit was saying, if you take a consultant, what will the consultant do? It's like a doctor. And I have a neighbor, by the way, right? So who's head of I think derma or something in JJ Hospital. So every time somebody falls sick, we call him, say, hey, Rajat, can you come and have a look at it? As far as I am concerned, every time I come here, I say, tumhara sugar high ho gaya hoga. Because you're smoking, you're drinking, that is why it is the problem. And then I tell him saying that I went to a doctor and he told me it is nothing to do with that, it is to do with stress, right? So,
Stress to quit smoking?
Stress to quit smoking, no. I'm just thinking about what's the next. So Ranjit just asked me, saying, can we go for another smoke? And I said, after this. Right. See, that's why I said, it's being in the moment, learning in the flow of work, right? That's important. So having said that, it's a job of a consultant to make sure that it sounds complex. Like I said at the initial stage, my job is to make sure that the learning sounds very complex when it is not. It's absolutely easy. So contextualize the law in terms of what is a must-have and what is a good to have. I agree with Prasenjit. So on my first HR job, I did exactly the same thing. I said, before I spoke to the labor lawyer, I said, I have to go through line item by line item and then decide what I want to do and ask that much and not go with the flow or the consultation what I'm getting. So that is important. Coming to the ROI is pretty easy. I mean, you look at what is the number of events or incidents which are not supposed to happen are happening today, and after you roll out a particular module, what happens? That's number one. Second is from the EX, the Employee Experience Survey, and everybody is practically doing it, and some of you are possibly deploying some Qualtrics kind of a employee survey, some of you are doing it the other manual way. There's nothing right or wrong about it, right? It's about getting the infographics and how good it looks like on the board. That's what is important. In that, if you do a 360-degree evaluation, what is the ROI that I have got from the training? Number one. Number two, from mentoring from my manager and their manager. Then you would understand ROI is easier to deploy rather than going by a learning professional like me. We would say that it's a 33% ROI. Guess what? Your business is not performing and you've got 3 compliance cases on you. So that is not an ROI, right? So that's where I'll stop and over to you.
Thank you very much. It's a great point. Ajit sir, coming to you before I go about delving into the discussion. The first question that I have from you is that there are a lot of aspiring HRs here, who really are working, doing deep work. How do our content make it to your books? How do our content make it to your books? Can we write our stories to you so that you publish them?
Oh my God. Look, frankly speaking, all my stories come from you guys only. So, day before yesterday, I was talking to somebody and I asked him, "Kya ho gaya? Khana khane chale?" So he said, "I am fasting." So I said, "What happened? You are fasting on a Monday. वो 7 सोमवार का व्रत रखा है क्या? अच्छी वाइफ मिले उसके लिए?" कहता, "नहीं सर, शादी तो हो गई. This is for retention." So you guys only give me content. It is not that I am publishing my own content, and in my latest book, what I have said is, all of you can use those stories. These are like Panchtantra stories. Nothing is mine. It is your stories. I have just written them, put them together. In fact, I have brought a book for you guys. I will present it after we complete the discussion.
Thank you very much. And it's actually very motivating. Seeing information getting democratized is something which was never happening in this world. And I think, that is why the concepts which got developed in 1935 by Freud or Maslow or, Jung are still not implemented in our human civilization. So great work, sir. I really appreciate that side of it. So now I'll come to the topic, the discussion. So my first question, and this is more of a personal question, what framework can I use to regulate my compliances?
Okay, let's see it in 2 perspectives. I was hearing Prasenjit, he gave you a very good thing where he talked about financial बात कर लो. हमारी जो सबसे बड़ी problem होती है, the biggest problem we have is, I will tell you in example format. So I was talking to a Uber driver. So I asked him, मुझे वाशी जाना है. So he said, पर मुझे तो थाने जाना है. And I was like, what the hell? I am the customer. I am going to decide where I want to go. But that guy has a different agenda. So when business guys are actually talking to you, they also feel the same. मेरे को वाशी जाना है, ये मेरे को कहाँ थाने लेके जा रहा है? I don't want to go there. So thing is, when anyone buys a vehicle, the person buys a vehicle to drive. Fine. And the first framework he said, कि you have to tell the person, mileage अच्छा आए उसके लिए क्या करना चाहिए, should I tell you? And the person will listen to you. Fine. So that is financial. Second part of this framework is regulatory. PUC karaya, otherwise fine lagega. This is the language which everyone understands that, okay, regulatory is something which is important. Then third thing which you can talk about is operational risks. Have you got your maintenance done for the vehicle? If you have not got your maintenance done, it will break down somewhere. So these are operational risks you can actually talk about, and moment you start talking about operational risk, आपका धंधा बंद हो जाएगा. Your customers will be disappointed. The person quickly understands what you are talking about. And fourth risk is brand risk. सर रोज सवेरे गाड़ी धो लिया करो, बहुत खराब लगती है. What will other people think about you? Moment you keep these four things in mind, and look, I have little bit trivialized it by giving examples, but these are the four pillars. If you use these four pillars, you will be able to convince any business leader that this is why we need compliance. Now, as far as compliance framework is concerned, it is very boring, but that is how it works. I was going through this organization. So they do these kind of conferences. There a person comes, speaks, there are 50 people, every week they meet, they speak about what I need leads for. And they have a set process. You look at Toastmasters, it has a similar kind of process. When I was a young HR guy, I used to think, ये क्या SOP बनाते रहते हैं? Why do they do it? ये ISO audit, this is all faltu, this is waste of time. And frankly speaking, many of us think that way. I also used to think that way, that there is no value add in this. We are just doing it for the sake of it. It is a tick mark activity. But if you actually think of scaling your business, then this documentation, this policy framework actually comes handy. You cannot multiply if that policy framework is not there. So first is you have to put policies, what are your SOPs, how you are going to do things, who is going to be accountable for those things. That is your first part. Then you prepare a blueprint saying, okay, I have these 5 areas. In these 5 areas, these are the risks. And for these risks, I want to put these controls. Third thing you do is you automate this whole piece by saying, okay, if these are the 5 controls, how I am going to monitor it, at which frequency, how I am going to train people on these risks. And you do that. Once you are set, then what you do is audit. You audit, find gaps, and let me tell you, audit is very important. I went to a doctor. I had a frozen shoulder. So he asked me to stand straight, like this. So I stretched out both my arms. Right now I can't do it, otherwise you will not hear. So I stretched my arm, and he said, you are not standing straight. I said, what the hell? I am standing straight. I know I am standing straight. He said, I am telling you, you are not standing straight. So we agreed to disagree. I changed my doctor. Fine. That is a risk when you keep telling your business, they may change. Then the other doctor was very smart. Instead of telling me that you are not standing straight, he said, you stand in front of mirror. And when I stood in front of mirror, I realized earlier doctor was also right. I was not standing straight. So that is what audit does. Thing is, how you have to put it across. If you put it across like you are on a war with business, business is not going to listen. In fact, you will get fired. So don't take that risk. Try to do it in a manner where business can see. So create dashboards, put data together, show aisa dikhta hai tu. If you have some relationship with, say, PF office or ESIC office, ask them to visit you. No, my earlier managing director used to tell me, go to police, go to all these regulatory offices, call them, because right now we are starting business. And at this point in time, if you call them and they come, they know you have a relationship. If something goes wrong, for the sake of this relationship, the person is going to help you. So I've given you 2 frameworks and some practical tips which you can use for implementing compliance.
That's a great takeaway for everyone.
Add to what Arjit said, right? So, a very crucial point. What you know, it's not important. How you communicate that is absolutely crucial, right? So, what are we looked at as? And we are in different stages of our careers and lives as far as HR is concerned. HR is supposed to be a value add, not a critique, right? All of us have grown up, and I remember when I started my career, I thought HR is about criticizing, showing the mirror and the first doctor being the first doctor, right? Without the mirror. It's only today when you look at it saying that, hey, if this is what you do, this is the value that you'll get, or this is the event that will happen, would be very nice, is when people will start listening to you, and HR then gets a seat on the table. Otherwise, they don't. So that's important. Thank you for bringing that up.
Super. I think, thank you everyone. And I think, that answers one critical aspect, that how do we really get that trust built between the leaders and the HR professionals, right? So thank you, sir. Great value. So Prasenjit, I'll come to you. My question to you is on the second, it's on the aspect of tier 2 state, tier 2 cities, the conditions that tier 2 businesses are operating in today. We as technology, we bring in compliant businesses, and we try to optimize the processes for them. For us, till now, it is really hard to crack into tier 2, right? We see new founders are really evolving into that space, and the technologies are becoming standard for compliances and all. But there is a scope of skipping the compliances. Once you let go of that value, it kind of makes more money and makes you more competitive compared to China, of course, right? So that is one of the reasons that comes down. So what is the solution to that? Is there a solution to it?
So Harjit already told you, storytelling is one of the solution. You have to put those 4 parameters. So I work in a region where a lot of startups, a lot of diamond, a lot of jewelry, Gujarati businessmen don't want to follow compliances. We have to manage. So I will just say this much, right? And how we manage it, कि उनको समझाना पड़ता है. तो समझाना, we do it on these 4 parameters. कि सर ये नहीं करेंगे तो ये आएगा. Financial being the biggest aspect. That's why I mentioned. Operational, brand risk is also. Tier 2 cities, and every founders, every businessman who understand business, because definitely they want to grow, they understand it, a bit of it. It's not that there is no struggle, but learnings are there and people are following it through. बहुत important हो जाता है कि tier 2 cities में to build relationship with the government people, especially in the tier 2 cities. So we used to visit PF commissioner के साथ चाय पीना, police commissioner के साथ बात करना. It's a very natural thing, okay? And कभी-कभी ऐसे करना पड़ता है कि आ जाइए, देख के जाइए, and then they realize. So ये diplomacy है. It's a very different tangent of HR. How you manage diplomatically. बहुत how do I say it? बहुत fine line of way है. You have to be politically, diplomatically smart enough to handle those things. But I think HR leaders understood जिन्होंने manage किया है. But yes, constant storytelling, mentioning, making them understand that अगर ये हम नहीं करेंगे तो क्या risk है, is actually helping. So a lot of organizations coming. If you look at Gujarat, they have Vibrant Gujarat, all of it, right? And there is a great focus on Gujarat, on the startup community, right? You have seen gift cities, all of it. And businessmen, entrepreneurs in Gujarat, they are very focused how they bring it up. Even they want to add value. And they want to implement new things. Predominantly, from a business side of it, what I have seen as a business guys, because I've worked with them very closely, all of us, they want to see if I'm investing 1 rupee, whether I'm getting 10 rupees. This is typically a mindset of a businessman, be it Gujarati, Marwari, you take it any businessman, okay? 1 रुपए 100 रुपए मिलता है कि नहीं? If Keka can deliver it, क्या?
Got it. While you say that, working with Gujaratis is hard because they don't want to follow the compliance. They are the ones setting it up in this country. So it's quite a paradox.
The company I'm working with, is a multinational company. Fine. So you might think that, okay, when a company grows from a small to big, then automatically these things come because nobody wants to deal with these small compliances and take a business risk. Like you talked about stories. Stories are very powerful in any business, small or big. Oh, that company which is like a multinational company and they did not have a BGV process and their operation was out for 9 months because somebody complained of sexual harassment. Fine. Moment you say that, you've already bought a customer कि अच्छा sexual harassment भी देख लेते हैं और BGV भी देख लेते हैं. That company which is like he was talking about, couple of companies, they were fined for data privacy something for some millions of dollars. And moment you say that, then people are like, नहीं ये तो नहीं करना है. Data privacy में what is that we need to do? Okay, you want to list on New York Stock Exchange? There is SOC compliance which you have to take care of. Would you want to go through the SOC compliance, that what are the elements of the SOC compliance and how it is going to work? Look, moment you start doing this kind of storytelling, taking examples from the real world, and again, depends upon the aspiration of the company automatically becomes compliant. As far as my company is concerned, they are absolutely first compliance, then anything else.
All right, fear selling works, guys, right? Scare the shit out of founders. So, but again,
No,
while
it is
stories-
very important because typically in MNC company, like we are an MNC company, right? We have to follow regulations. There is no doubt about it, right? Most of us, I think, we are working with MNC company. But when it comes to startup, there is a challenge. What I have foreseen on startups. So that startup storytelling, because when a MNC company, there is a foundation, right? 50 years of foundations that has been already laid. The processes are already set. Now you have to scale up and build on it. But someone like a tier 2, you said, right, who is starting the business. What I have seen with my friends and other people, and also spoke to many business person, these are the challenges. So storytelling is a great concept on that. That's how.
The first story that you told, I was thinking from a founder's perspective. Wouldn't it compromise psychological safety of the founder? While it creates a net positive outcome for the business, but just looking at the other side of it.
Look, there are two aspects of business. One is business building. When you buy a vehicle, you want to drive. You don't want to get into what all I have to do for it. You want to go somewhere and you want to drive the vehicle. So when you are starting your business, first thing is you have to come cash positive. If you are not going there, then there is no point of doing the compliance. That is how it starts. And the owner mindset is like that only. And there is nothing wrong with that. Thing is, how you can protect that owner from, because ये basic चीज़ है, registration plate if you don't have, then moment you start driving, you are going to hit a block and you will not be able to drive. So it is not that from the day one you have to do SOC compliance. Not needed. What you need for running your business and can you smoothly run it? Look, PF also says minimum 20 employees, then you start doing it. So it is not that I have seen how people beat that. I have a lot of founders who actually keep exchanging notes with me. So they say, अरे अगर 40 आदमी हो जाता है हम 2 कंपनी बना देते हैं. Fine. And I can manage 5 companies. I don't need HR. My CA can do HR.
Is that the option that companies come up with everything? Electoral bonds, I heard the same logic.
So it is not that from day one, don't scare people that you can't start. Law already provides a lot of provisions for founders that you don't have to do everything. And it takes a lot going from 0 to 100 crores or 0 to 100 employees also. So moment you start getting there, that you are getting into a zone where you are having 100 employees and you are going for 1,000 employees, that is when you should start thinking about compliance, that you should not hit a roadblock.
Perfectly said. And it actually, there is an analogy coming into my mind from Simon Sinek, which was, we all buy cars and we all understand that, what is the purpose of a car? It is to take us from point A to point B. It requires petrol or some sort of fuel to do that. But the purpose of the car will never be to, to fuel it, right? It is always going to be to take you from point A to point B. So while these compliances exist, they cannot be the reason of the organization to exist. So fulfill that reason. At the same time, be compliant, because again, it's a society that we live in, and it is essential. So coming to the last question, which is going to be common for all of you, could you recommend people some technologies that they can utilize to make their life a little easy here?
So I'll take the lead on that. So like you do a customer lifecycle management, the concept that we have adopted to is the employee lifecycle management. And that starts at a pre-employment level, right? So what we do is ensure that people who are joining us, they know exactly what they're getting into, what are the must-have courses that they need to complete before joining, and what is it that they need to join. So we basically lay down the next 90 days in front of the people. That's number one.
So a comprehensive onboarding program,
exactly,
including compliance.
An onboarding program gets to them before they join us, right? So take out the element of surprise. So they are prepared for what you have in store for them. That's number one. That technology can be done with any ERP, whether you take PeopleSoft, SAP, all of them, any Zing HR also, anything you take, I'm sure you would have that as well. Yeah. There is an onboarding software, and so that is important. I will not recommend a particular platform, but that is important to have an onboarding software. Because otherwise, what will happen is, moment you create manual onboarding programs, there are 99% chances that you will miss out at least 85% of people in that. That's number one. Number two is during their life, right, after onboarding, in the first 90 days, it's important for them to complete the courses that they're supposed to do. The compliance courses and the onboarding, what are the policies, what are the do's and don'ts in the organization, and they are termed differently in different organizations. Then you use LMS. So learning management system is a must-have, right, in today's time and age. The third part, in the same learning management system, you send them reminders, right? In terms of there is a term called recursive courses or repetitive courses every 3 months or every 6 months, so that it remains fresh. Now, I'll also give you, so there are 3 things that I would recommend. One is the onboarding software. The second is the LMS. And the third one is a very good assessment, which can be taken agnostic of the device. Now, if I'm stuck in the traffic, I have time, I can do those assessments. Or if I'm reading something, I don't like it, I'll stop, finish what I have to do, right? That's important. The crucial fact is make sure that these are available in a micro-learning contextual format with examples. Otherwise, you will not have the compliance or the recollection value. So that's the other thing that I would recommend.
Thank you very much. Ajit sir, any tech?
Look, we are sitting on a stage where 2 sides it is written Keka. Now, what do you want me to recommend? Okay, let me tell you. I was writing a book on HR. It was a startup called Zebra Learn, and they publish visual books because they think abhi ye purana, nobody is going to read books, so books have to be visual. I think I write very simple, so they reached out to me. They said, "Will you write a HR book for us?" I said, "Okay." And I wrote a chapter. They said, "Sir, this is very complex." So I rewrote it 3 times. Then they said, "Ha, ye wala simple barabar hai. This is like a child can read." Then I wrote that book for almost 14 months. And then I reached out to Brilliant, I reached out to Kshitij, I reached out to many other people to write recommendation for that book. And everyone wrote a recommendation. Now, Brilliant knows me, so maybe he has said good things about me because he knows me. The best compliment from that book came from the wife of the owner of Zebra Learn. I read your book And then I made changes in the organization. I implemented a HR software and my life became much, much simpler. Because otherwise managing people was hell for me. I can recommend that if you are a startup owner, you can start with Excel sheet, no problem. Moment you start growing, move from Excel sheet, what is written on this stage. So, that's what you wanted me to say.
Thank you very much. To you, Prasan.
Yeah, no, so I echo both of their thoughts. So one is that make simple, right? Laws, compliances, these are all very complex things. Make simple. Video, audio, it's actually very helpful, right? Start small, right? Maybe a session, periodic session, because it's based on the size of the organization. If you're a big company, you will have LMS, 360-degree feed forward, behavioral, per service, all of that. This Keka and other companies also, right? If you're small, you can start with Excel, video, audio, but simplicity has to be there because people fear it, laws, they don't want to read it, because the moment you fear it, you don't want to get into, right? This happens in HR fraternity a lot, what I have seen at least in my career, right? So people don't want to get there, the compliances. So if HR do not want to get there into compliances and choose not this area of learning much, think about an associate or an engineer or a manufacturer or a business guy would be choosing that. So making them learn is to have to simple. We need to make it very, very simple where my daughter can read, kind of that. Yeah, thank you.
All right, I think that brings me to the summation of the panel discussion. One personal question I'm getting, anybody can take it actually. We are a HR technology, right? And we deal with compliances in form of like all the PF, PT, SI and all of those things. We take care in the payroll part of the business. Every year I am so scared when budget discussions start, because I always pray that please don't change income tax slabs, because that increases 20 developers, throws my roadmap into the pit, and there is a new roadmap which comes in, which is to make the software compliant again. So while we suffer so much with the dynamicity of the laws, and there is a big lot of suffering that comes because of it. At the same time, if you look at the businesses, the HR professionals inside the businesses, they also suffer in coping up with these changes which are happening. So we as a solution, what we did, there is a compliance segment into the learn segment of Keka, where all the administrators can see what are the compliances which are changing. We try to give it to them. But again, not everybody over here is on Keka. So is there any other methods for people to really cope up with the changes, the dynamicity of laws that are changing? It's just internet scrapping.
You have to live the life as it comes. So if environment is going to change, you have to change. There is no option. So keep those 20 developers ready, because a lot is going to change.
All right, guys. Thank you very much.
I'll just
yeah,
add,
please.
flexibility and simplicity are the two terms that you can take. Irrespective whether you're a startup or an established organization, if you're not flexible, possibly somebody else will wipe you out. And if you can't simplify, nobody's going to understand what your message is. So those are two things that I'll leave you with.
Most likely you will not see the old tax regime from the next fiscal.
All right, that's an update for everybody. All right, so that brings us to the end of panel discussion. I hope you guys enjoyed it thoroughly. So thank you, panelists, for finding time for this.
Right, a quick picture, and then we'll move on to the second panel. All right, post this extremely engaging and informative panel for that matter, we have a second panel that is being moderated by Dr. Anand Agarwal, the Executive Director of ISBR School and University, Bangalore. Can we please have Dr. Anand on stage? Next up is our first speaker for the day, that is Mr. Vishal Bhatia, the Senior Human Resource Manager at VBuy. Can we have a huge round of applause, please? Our second speaker for the evening is Ms. Radhika Raichura, who is the co-founder and HR Director of Viva Connect. And our third speaker for the day is Mr. Rohit Bhargava, who has worked with Eros International as the Vice President of Human Resources. Right, so this conversation will be led by Dr. Anand. So over to you, Dr. Anand.
Okay, so we had a very interesting first panel. It was very informative, and we learned a lot from there. And I want to connect the end of the first panel with the beginning of the second panel. We talked about the technology, the use of digital tools like Keka and many other tools which you talked about. In terms of compliance, how can we use the tools for compliance? At the same time, we are seeing that we are now living in a digital world. Digital transformation is happening all around us, which we cannot even think of like 10 years back. AI and ML, it is happening now. And with that, there is a lot of change in the landscape of compliance. And there are some new challenges emerging because of that, which we never thought of earlier, like data privacy. There are now risk of cyber threat. I was just reading today, and I was very surprised, actually. I was going through this IT governance organization in UK, and I could not believe my eyes when I read it, that in last 3 months, only in last 3 months of this year, there were 30 billion, 578 million, 3,872 cyber attacks in the world. It's an alarming figure. And there are millions of them happening in India also. Now, under this kind of environment, when you are in the businesses and you are responsible for the business, and I know Vishal has been taking care of the digital aspects of the business in his organization. How do you manage this kind of situation in your organization? I want to limit my panel just to get the learning from your experiences so that we can all learn from your experiences. So my first question is from Vishal. How do you manage this kind of challenging landscape which is changing? Use of technologies there's a digitization, there's a digitalization, and so much going on. Along with that, how do you manage compliances, and how do you safeguard the data and make sure that breaches doesn't occur?
So let me begin by telling you or everyone present around that the concept of data protection / data privacy has come about now to the fore. Now, previously, as in prior to the GDPR, which is the General Data Protection Regulation, which is kind of like the gold standard for all the data privacy laws across the globe. So prior to the GDPR, data laws were quite fragmented. There was the DPA in the UK, and India had its own IT Act, which was like way old, 2000, I believe, which came about. So thereafter, what happened was, I'll give you an example of my organization without divulging into details. Just 2 years prior to the advent of GDPR, ours is an MNC, so we have staff spread across all geographies, territories, etc., different time zones and all. So we have staff working remotely. So the use of VPNs, so the use of, all bring your own devices and etc., etc. What happened once was that there was a malware attack in our company which happened due to XYZ reasons. What we did was, we did not know what to do at that time. There was no, there was no action team, there was no data protection in place, there were no fines, nothing was specified. So we were like, okay, this is not that severe. But then we realized that, it could snowball into something huge. So in order to prevent that, the first step that we took was, we centralized the entire data protection team into UK back then, because India back then, we did not have anything per se. So we started by implementing as small measures as having a two-factor authentication in place. Now, almost everyone over here has a Google account or any other email account wherein you have the two-factor authentication which happens. It could be either via an SMS, or you get a unique code, or you have those codes which are there on your phone or otherwise. So we started as having a two-factor authentication in place for all our devices. Now we also have a front end. So what do we do in stores? What do we do in our retail outlets, wherein how do we protect our data which is just lying about? So even over there in our devices, we call them EPOS devices, etc. We started implementing as small as two-factor or multi-factor authentication in place. Thereafter, the VPN policy came about. Thereafter, the bring your own device policy came about, which was previously not present. So hence, these are the gradual steps which happen. Luckily for us, it was pre-GDPR, it was pre any legislation which came about. Now in India, as you guys must have read, that on 11th August 2023, we had the Digital Data Protection Bill which came about. The framework is there. They have kind of emulated what GDPR is, but they have not mentioned the specifics. I think it'll come about after the elections or otherwise. The basic details about what kind of data, data retention, how to store it, where to store it, etc., will come about. So it starts micro, but the management has to be supportive. Now, as we always say in GDPR is that you are always guilty until proven innocent. So in the field of data protection, data privacy, you're always guilty, which means if the ICO, which is the Information Commissioner's Office or any other central authority, comes knocking at my door, they will first threaten us with the consequence and then ask that, what are the safety measures that you have in place in the organization. So,
what about your experience, Rohit, in this aspect? Especially if remote working is happening around India and all around the world nowadays, what are the implications of remote working with this?
I think not just in terms of remote working, I think remote working, what it has done is probably expedited certain things that we would not have otherwise done, right? So, digitization of documents and then the regulations around it. So something as simple as a lot of times as a part of someone's joining, you collect their Aadhaar card. If you actually take that initiative to research that you're collecting someone's identity with you, you would realize that there are stipulations around it as to where you can store the Aadhaar card, Aadhaar number, whether it has to be a vault, whether it has to be a different server. So what it has done, if your intent is right and if you are actually trying to stay completely compliant, is that it has expedited that. And apart from that, I think, that is the only take that I have on this, that this would have eventually happened. But now, because the pandemic expedited this, people did it. Otherwise, it would have taken time and probably some bad news where you'd realize that, oh, data was breached and you reacted to it. So that's my take, especially just on this part.
Yeah, so your answer is hinting some words towards intention and the building of culture and the habit in people. So I have been working in organizations for the last 20 years. Whenever a new initiative is there, it's either because of compliance or because of any other initiatives being taken, there's always some kind of resistance to change. There are challenges there. So I want to ask this question from Radhika. So based on your experience, how do you overcome the challenges and the resistance which is there in the team, or maybe not always in the founder, like in the panel discussion happened in the first one. There are also challenges with the team, with the employees. And how do you overcome those kind of challenges and resistance to change when we know something is important to be done, not only because of regulation and safety, also because of our long-term sustainability of the business?
So I will tell my background. I'm working in Viva Connect and we are CPaaS company. Yes. So when we have made few practices taken into our company where we are so transparent to the employees and we make them aware on daily basis, like timely basis, where the resistance is very less from the employees. On the other, secondly, we we have kept audit vendors, external and internal, where they keep on, doing their audits on timely basis. We have kept a security department in our company where HR and security department goes sync, where any security related data for the HR is to be given the information to the employees is through the HR. So that is a few points where we think that, it has worked in our company.
Okay, so let me reiterate the 3 points. One is the transparency, other is
Yes.
the review by audit, third one is the monitoring.
Yes.
Do you want to add some more points here?
So as she rightly said, audit, constant monitoring, and it has to have the top-down approach. So as our elite panelists previously also mentioned that, you kind of scare the management that, if this does not happen, be ready for a good, fine or punishment. Like, again, I'll give you an example of Indian Digital Data Protection Act. The fines vary from 50 crores to 200 crores for different kinds of breaches, non-compliance, etc., etc. Even in the GDPR, it can go from 2% up to 4% of your global turnover, or it can go up to 20 million euros as well. Then again, these are fines prescribed, you might not get it. So constant, besides transparency, a culture of compliance, which means constant learning and development, constant refresher trainings, which we do at the organization level to all the staff members, be it as simple as a sales assistant, right up to the management. We have the constant training programs which keep on happening at regular intervals. There's a term known as data protection impact assessment or a risk assessment, which we regularly carry out. So DPIA, data protection impact assessment, happens before the start of a project to kind of mitigate the risk and say that, hey, it's okay to go, but these are the risks involved, so be careful. Or a risk assessment which happens when the project or a process is already there. So like periodic risk assessment which we carry out in the form of audits or otherwise. So that is what me and my team, we do for our company at the global level as well as India as well now. So yeah, constant refresher trainings and risk assessments need to be carried out.
Yeah, that's a great addition. Rohit, you want to add something?
Yeah, I think, see, when you're asking people, and the last panel covered most of the things, but when you're asking people around you, not just top down, not your top management, when you're asking people to do specific things, also give them the freedom to do other things which they, wherein you are not putting shackles on them. So for example, if you're telling them that, they need to clock in, they need to clock out, etc., then if it's not a customer facing role, you give them the freedom to perhaps not have a dress code. I'm just saying it's a matter of, if there are certain things that need to be done, but beyond that, give them the freedom so that they feel that, okay, these things are mandated by law, that's why I have to do this. But apart from that, there is so much other freedom for me to go about and concentrate on my core competence, and I'm not shackled by other regulations that are, for the lack of a better word, HR created.
So just to add to this, that it has to be, as everyone else has said, it has to be people driven, okay? And in order to get that into place, as Mr. Khanduja was saying that, policies are boring, SOP is boring, but you need to have those things in place. So similarly, for data privacy protection, you need to have basic policies in place, right from how do you share your basic Google documents or your, what is the kind of access that you give to each and every individual, whether they can download that file, whether you can limit the download that, after 24 or 48 hours, that file access would disappear by itself. So you can time it. You can even time the deletion of your files. You can time the deletion of your emails. So these we have those policies in place, like Google Suite documentation policy. You have how to share the documents, and also right from policies and procedures, that has to be brought down. So again, the emphasis is always on training, refresher training, policies, and also disciplinary. So like the carrot and stick. In case if you do something wrong, you'll definitely get penalized in some way or the other, because we are talking about data, which is the next oil, or in fact, it is the oil right now. So if you lose data, or if you do something, or if you manage to have a data breach, or we managed to have a data breach because of you, you would definitely be penalized for it.
The oil well itself can burn.
Absolutely, yeah.
When you were talking about it, one question came to my mind. So I was preparing the performance appraisal system for ISBR Business School for all the employees, and I was also thinking about the same thing. We have some compliances, some regulations, some AICT and all other things. And I was thinking whether I should keep the compliances as a part of KRA or not. And I did some research in the internet, and I have seen there are different types of practices. One is compliances are part of KRAs of many employees. That's the one practice. Other practices, it is not a part of KRA. How do you do it in your organization?
So actually, we have not kept compliances as part of course, the appraisal cycle. Though what we do, what we have done in our organization from onboarding to exit period, we kind of use the keywords of compliances from the start when anyone is joining our organization. So, everyone is aware of the compliances, that this company is well versed with all the compliances and, kind of follow, we have to also follow. And if nobody, I mean, if the employee doesn't want to kind of join us, they should be aware of what they are losing out, yeah. So that has helped on the onboarding stage itself.
So it's more like a hygiene factor for
Yes,
the
yes,
employees.
it is. Because in my company, a few years back, as he said that, data data security was not the main criteria before, but as we are working with banks mostly, so, we had kept something, the data was breached from one of the bank, and they just रेड कैसे पड़ती है आपके घर पे अगर हो तो it's like that, they just come into your office and they just screw you. So like that's how we have made ourselves very compliant.
And sometimes I think, as a researcher also, that we talk about tools, we talk about processes, we talk about careers, we don't talk much about soft skills and software aspects. Even though we are living in this age where we have digitization and artificial intelligence, employees still talk about things which are not allowed, like tera salary kya hai, that person has got increment, and this is not allowed, but people talk about it a lot. It always happens in the companies, even if the HR policy first point is all salaries and increments are confidential. How do you manage that? It's also a matter of compliance, internal compliance of the policies.
So see, from, again, compliance from operation standpoint, different, but from HR or human resource standpoint, compliances include right from PF, ESIC, which I'm sure everyone here knows that non-compliance into these is almost liable for criminal persecution. So the directors do get love letters from the authorities in case if you become non-compliant. But coming back to sir's question that, what happens when, let's say if I have a salary revision. So in our company, we have periodic salary revisions which happen. They are linked to KRA KPIs. Compliance is one of the aspects only for the HR department. For other departments, it's different, basis their KRAs and KPIs. So in order to ensure that what we do is that there are always disclaimers which I kept that, if you're found discussing or if we found, having a discussion about XYZ confidential data or otherwise you're liable for disciplinary action as per policy and procedure. So that's one of the way of dissuading it as much as possible. Also what I do as an HR, because I also take care of HR functions for my company, is that just after the salary review, and believe me guys, it works, I start a grapevine of my own at the floor level that this is happening, this is going to happen, just to see as to how much do people fall into the trap of talking about it. And once we get the official or the grapevine confirmation that this has happened, we then take the measures accordingly. Now, the employees who are stuck with us over a period of time, they know that it's a grapevine. So almost 50 to 60% of my staff is well versed that, hey, don't take that chance. It's just a rumor. It could be started by someone from the management. Be careful. Do not fall into that trap. So sometimes grapevines help. And
that's very interesting. Rohit, what is your experience in this matter?
No, so we didn't really, last company that I worked at, we were a listed company. So we knew the repercussions of non-compliance. And therefore it was, constant revision, constant re-emphasis on being compliant. Otherwise the repercussions were there for everybody to see. But when we're talking about compensation, right? People will discuss the compensation, and more importantly, they will be puzzled about why I'm receiving what I'm receiving and what someone else is receiving. So we spent a lot of time actually telling people how compensation is arrived at. We talked about compa ratios, we talked about bands, we talked about, this is the base multiplier, this is your departmental multiplier, this is how it arrives at, this is how everything is cascaded, this is why what you're getting paid, your the 3 Ps of your performance philosophy, your compensation philosophy. So once you start talking about it, it leaves very little room for people to have those hush-hush murmurs about it. Right? So explain it to them. Some people will, whether they agree with the philosophy or not, that's very different. But at least they know what is the methodology by which it is arrived at. So, that way I think it reduces it. But then there are stray incidents. And I think there are also countries where you are actually, that you can discuss your compensation with someone else to ensure that you're not being discriminated against. Right? So again, that is something that we have created internally. It is not something that, that it's a very, very confidential thing, or whether it should be confidential or not. It's something that you need to go back to and decide whether you want to have pay transparency up to what level and how mature your organization is in being able to handle it. So that's a call you have to take.
Yes, yes. The maturity and the progressive level of the organization is a key factor here. And we are at different stages of maturity in this region at this point of time. So there's a full array and portfolio of the things like hygiene factor, carrot and stick, transparency, and all these different methods are there which are important. But the most critical thing is how you ensure that your company sustains for a long time without coming into the prey of the, it's like a prey and predator relationship, most of the time. You can secure your data, you can make policies, you can make SOPs, and you can do all the compliances. But still the predators are out there, and you can see the numbers I just told in the beginning. Many of these companies are secured, they have done their best. So how do you update yourself, and how frequently, what activities you do to update that you don't fall to the predators which are out there? How do you do that?
So now, I don't know about other companies, but our company, almost all IT companies have their own QA, quality analysis or quality testing team. So our company has that specific department which constantly does the security testing of our, let's say, website, which is the most prone, for any company, the website, because it could contain data, etc., would be prone to attacks and all. So we do those security testings regular basis on, plus we also have bounty hunters who are also known as ethical hackers, whom connect with us on our specified email ID, and they do inform us that, hey, this is the system vulnerability, or these are the pitfalls in your system. Please get them checked, and if you find my report, which I have shared, as suitable for you, what's the reward that you're going to give me? So we also have that kind of an informal external program which is there in place, which is for the ethical hackers / bounty hunters. So we do that, we get those emails, and plus we have our internal systems. In this time and age, I'll be honest with you, you cannot prevent a data breach. It's near impossible. You will face some or the, in some form or the other. But the only way to prevent is to not put in more locks, because there'll always be keys, there'll be hidden codes, etc. for people to get in. But the only way to prevent a breach is make your people aware, train, retrain, refresh your trainings back to back. That is the only way you can prevent a data breach from happening.
I think you have made a very good point that you cannot avoid it. There are companies like Twitter, Facebook, the big brands we know, they all face data breaches. So my last question to the panel is about this. And if you have experienced this, I know incidences occur in the organization. If some incidences like that has happened in your present or previous organizations, which relates to the data breach, cybersecurity threat, or privacy issues, how did you manage it? What are the steps you take? Suppose something happens tomorrow. What are the steps you will take to minimize the losses, to minimize the outcome which is negative there?
See, the GDPR or the Act, it specifies the steps which are to be taken, which is also mentioned in the Indian Digital Data Protection Framework. However, those steps are that, let's say if you come to know of a breach, within 72 hours, you report it to the authorities that, hey, a breach has happened. We'll give you further details as to what is the kind of breach, what is the kind of data compromised, how many people, that is data subjects or data principal in Indian context, how many people are impacted, what are the security measures in place that we have, and they'll also check our past history and everything else. So you first do the incident reporting to the regulatory authority. Thereafter, you get your house into place by checking your security systems and especially the vulnerability. We also have a team which constantly monitors the dark web. Now, I'm sure almost everyone over here knows what the dark web is, wherein every every so frequent people get to see that so many thousands and millions of people have been exposed. Their data is exposed on the dark web. People are selling the data and etc. etc. So we have an team which constantly monitors the dark web. Thereafter, as I said, you have the multi-factor authentication in place. Many a times, in case if we haven't suffered it, but in case if the breach happens, take away the VPN access of people working remotely, change the VPNs, change the codes which are unique, get generated at periodic intervals and otherwise. So get the house in order first. Thereafter, again present the case finally with the report, detailed report. This is the incident. But the most important thing is report it to the authorities rather than them coming knocking to your door that, hey, you've lost so many people's data. What are you doing about it? Go up front, inform them, and also show the security measures in place. So this is what is specified by the GDPR. Data protection, again, timelines, everything else will come out soon, I presume after the election or otherwise. So thereafter we get further details on the Indian Act as well.
It seems so complex. Now, even dark web is associated with this.
No, the dark web exists, it's always been there, but people's data many times gets sold over there. So we as a company, we have a CISTM team, an incident team, which constantly monitors the dark web also, so that, in case if there is a remote possibility of our data being exposed, or if there is some vulnerability of our company getting displayed over there, we'd come to know and take corrective measures so that it does not aggravate further or snowball further. Because any act, the principal concept of a fine, penalty, or the bottom line is how many people's lives have been impacted, what kind of data has been impacted by the breach. So the count is what matters. So for me, as I said, report it to the authorities, put the house in place, thereafter formalize it, summarize it, so as to prevent it from happening in the near future or in the future. But you cannot do away with data breaches. They will happen. Be ready for it. Have your systems in place. That's it.
Okay, so coming from data breaches to compliance again now, I want to hear at the end, some interesting stories from you. We all love stories from your previous experience or from your present experience here, where the compliance had been an issue or a nightmare for you and you still got it done. Or what are the challenges you have faced and how you overcome those things? So if there's any story, please share with us from which we can learn.
So earlier, back then, there was, there was no transparency or online thing where we can, apply for any compliances, right? For that matter, very small thing, PF, we had to go to PF offices and, we had to, everything was very manual. So that, back then, there was a lot of penalties coming in the, a company where we had to give it to the vendor to fill the form or do the due diligence and then, submit it to the offices. But now, when it has become the digital part, where everything is transparent, company can really apply, submit that thing, everything on time. So that can prevent from the penalties coming to the company. So that we have made. What I have done in my company is I have taken all control in myself. So where though I have kept external vendors to check, but then everything is in-house.
So, an interesting story. This was back in 2018. So I'm sure all of our HR fraternity people log into the official company login every time for digital signature approval and to check the challans and get data or marking, as simple as marking a date of exit for any of the employees. So I'm sure by now all of you must have seen that there is an important, but the thing which would scare the most for you guys would be, click on a drop down for the establishment and it says e-inspection notice. Okay. Now, before coming to your company or the organization, God forbid if it happens, the e-inspection notice comes beforehand and it's there on the EPFO login. So whenever you guys next time log in, just click on it, keep your eyes closed, pray to whichever God you feel like, and pray that it remains blank. That is what I do almost every other day whenever I log in. So this happened in 2018, wherein this e-inspection notice was not there on the site back then. So we got an actual love letter, as I call it, from the authorities that we are coming for an inspection. It was a PF routine inspection. We had the data in place. But back then, we did not have everyone's Form 2, Form 11. Now you guys know, during the joining formalities, you collect Form 2, Form 11, which is your nomination form, etc., etc. So we did not have it for quite a few people. So what do? The inspection is like 3 days from now. And also, if you guys know, the letters, whenever they come from these authorities, they're usually delayed. Even if they come by speed post, date would be of, let's say, 2nd March, but you will get it in your hand on the 30th of March, and the inspection would be on 2nd April. So these things always happen. So we got this lovely letter from the PF that we are coming over. So I said, okay, we'll do something about it. We checked everything. We checked all the boxes. We have everything else in place. And being a startup of sorts, our directors have always been very, very flexible and supportive to us. So they always leave it to the HR team that take care of it. And in case if our intervention is required, we'll come in later. And plus they took a backseat. We started filling in the Form 2s and Form 11s. We had to share it to the employee soft copy overnight, sit for like what, till 3 in the morning. We finished that off. We asked them that please sign and send it across to us. We want to show it to for the inspection today. We had to send out mass mailers to the organization. They gave us all the forms. Luckily, we could show it to them. But one more incident at that point in time which happened was, we did not know that people who are working on our premise, the contract staff, they also have to be covered under PF and ESIC. Now the vendor very smartly was not paying the PF and ESIC of people coming to our premise. So what do you do in that case? So there again, you use the trick which you can. What I did was, I told the PF inspector, I'll give you the challans with people who are covered under it. I asked the vendor, whoever is covered under it, just give me those names, I'll give you those challans. So that way I got saved, because the PF inspector would not go asking the security guy or the housekeeping guy, ki, what is your name, and whether your name is there on the challan or not. So that is how we got saved back then. Thereafter we came to know that, it's a part of mandatory compliance, and you should not have lapse even by a minuscule percentage. Not even, there's no lapse or room for lapse when it comes to compliance. So you have to be either 100% compliant or not.
Right. So these are the love letters nobody loves.
No. Now they come in digital form through e-inspection notice. So
it's love emails coming now.
No. They won't send you an email.
No.
It's your responsibility to go to the website, check it, that, we've sent you the notice, and if they come in, show up, oh, the notice was sent back, then you did not check it or what.
So even if you don't love these love letters, you have to still flirt with them.
Absolutely. Or else your directors will end up flirting with them. And
yeah. Yeah. Rohit, from you, any story?
Yeah, so, bunch of interesting stories. Primarily, the first one was the fact that the company where I worked at, it was a promoter-driven company. It had been around for about 40 years, and then it became a public listed company. But for a lot of people, when they wanted to get loans or, it was very, very relationship-driven. So the head of the company wasn't necessarily Mr. This for a lot of people. He was Kishore Bhai, right? People would just walk up to him or just give him a call and say, ki, I need this much loan, my daughter's education, this, and he would approve it. And it would just come to us for processing. Or it would direct, so there were times it wouldn't even come to us. It would just go to finance for processing. That person gets the loan and it's done. So now, one of the biggest challenges was to actually navigate it very deftly and very, very, walking almost on a tightrope, where you tell that person that, you tell that person at the helm that I'm not trying to spoil the relationship that you've had for all these times. I'm actually trying to keep this company safe. Otherwise, this would happen, right? So that was for me, it was a very new thing to do. How do you approach someone like that? How do you tell them? Would they get offended? So had to make it very, very workable, where their relationship is still intact with that person, process is still followed, and we get things done. So where, it was a simple thing where we said that, sir, whenever someone approaches you, let us know, redirect that person towards us, and we're not saying we're not going to do this, we'll just put it in actual process. So over the course of time, that became a habit. And then whenever someone approached him, he said, hey, finally we got to the point where he said, you have to follow the process. And because the number of observations in audit started coming down, from our internal audit, it came down from like 40, just through simpler things like this, came down, at one point we had like 40 audit observations, we brought it down to about 10. He saw that a lot of these things were coming down, and then the statutory audits, these things started going down. When they see the result, you get a buy-in automatically. So you have to show them the result by, putting things into action.
That's very interesting. I mean, it's a different kind of perspective altogether now. That's great. I mean, when we say love letters from the agencies and regulatory bodies, this is like how you manage a wife. So it's a very different perspective, right? Okay, now I have the open floor for the audience. If it is intrigued, some of the points must have intrigued you, and you have some questions in your mind. A panel is open here.
Can we please have the mic over here?
I have a question regarding compliance. When we say compliance, we normally talk about employees. But there are contract employees also who are also on site with us. So should we, to check their billings or invoices, so should we also process and cross-check that, or it should not be done at our premises?
No, it should be. What we do as a practice is that, whenever the bill comes about, it will also be accompanied by the wages that are paid by them to the contractual staff. Have they deducted the PF? Have they deducted ESIC and every other MLWF, for example?
All the compliances.
Absolutely. And if it's not done, we stop their billing for that month or for that period or whatever it is. And only once it's done, only once it's paid for, then we move forward.
Okay. And there are vendors who they do not want to leak their rates. So how do we handle them?
There is no choice, it is compliance, or else they get a love letter. Because see, now what happens, even on the PF website, if you guys know, you have to declare your contractors and vendors also. Okay. All the details have to be declared with the employee name, director details, everything. Okay. So in case if that doesn't happen, the EPFO will connect to their heads directly. So yeah, it has to happen, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, some more questions? Yes?
Good evening all. Thank you so much. It was a very nice, very lively discussion, lot of value additions. 2, 3 very important takeaways from me. So I just say that and then my question. So one is compliance is needed for growth. Normally it happens, more compliance people don't want to do because they see that growth and compliance are not, they are opposites. Actually they are complementary. So when you want, if you want to grow, you need compliance. That was my first takeaway. Second, which I felt was that compliance, people are not doing compliance, As HR, if you want to do compliance, people are not sticking to it, then we can have ABC analysis of compliance also. Some are mandatory and regulatory, like something in banks, like if you say something from RBI, CRR, SLR, this is something which you cannot do without. And then there are other compliances, like you should be familiar with the policies. So if we can have that kind of framework, it is going to help, in implementation also, and like convincing the business managers. So this was just my summation.
Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
Any more questions? Yeah, from that gentleman there.
So, hi sir. We were speaking about data breach. So for example, Facebook's data is breached right now, and it is on the dark web. Other than those lowly life scammers, who else will buy that data? Like, what is it on sale for? Who is it on sale for? Those data. So that is what I wanted to ask.
So any data which goes on the dark web, it's not necessary that it's some psychopath who's selling drugs or otherwise. Even companies have their active teams on dark web. They also buy that data. Like you get those calls that you had visited this site, you are eligible for a credit card. So your data goes through all of these places. So dark web, there are active companies who have people monitoring that leaked data. They might even end up buying it at pennies, for pennies, So those are that's the kind of big data framework which they want to build, but not through ethical means sometimes. So it could be that, a company who's on par with Facebook, I'm not saying Facebook, but on par with Facebook, they might themselves buy that data. You never know.
But okay, for example, XYZ company bought Facebook's data. Now, how will Facebook identify okay, this person was on board with us a month back. Now he's in now 10 of them are in that app. So how do they tackle it?
What happens is, slightly divulging into the technicalities, kind of boring, but please bear with me. What happens is, whenever you go to Facebook or any other site for that matter, they have the term known as cookies placed onto your smart devices, be it your mobile phone or etc. Anyway, now these cookies send the data back about your behavioral patterns, your navigational details, your preferences, likes, dislikes, etc. So many times you guys see, not just Facebook, Google, any other big company, wherever you go, let's say if you visit a restaurant or otherwise, they'll flash those things which you've seen before, which means your liking and preferences. So similarly, coming back to your question, Facebook will come to know that this data was with us because they already have the repository of that data. Also the cookie preferences, which 90% of people present here, including me, do not know how to change from the browser settings to untick the cookies that I do not want any analytical cookies coming about on my device. I do not want any marketing stuff to be sent to me. There's also a term known as privacy policy, which all the companies need to have it in place. Even in India, it will happen soon. We've had it done for our company, and I'm proud to say that we are a 100% compliant company till now. I don't know if some other act comes about, we'll have to work towards it. But those cookies can definitely know that this was their data back then. And not just cookies, there are other analytical tools and devices as well which are there on your...
Last question. How it ends? Now XYZ company bought that data. Now we got to know, okay, XYZ has gotten my data, now what do you do about it? Do you tell the legal authorities or do you just...
There again, basis the different laws, like California has the CCPA. There was this transatlantic treaty which was there in Europe, between the European Union and the Americas, which again has fallen down due to Schrems and other people. I'll not go into the details of it, but there's an ICO, Information Commissioner's Office, there is a DPA, there is the Competitions Council. In the US, there are, a whole lot of authorities. You can very well knock at their door that, our data has been stolen by them. There are various laws, right from patent law, because see, if you steal someone's data, you definitely want to steal their designs, for example, or you want to emulate or copy their designs, or so hence, those things are there in place.
Okay, thank you. I mean, all this looks so complex to me because I'm not an HR person. It looks so scary to me. I'm happy that I'm not an HR person, but I love HR. You know why? I'll tell you a real story. So we had the meeting in the office. All directors, deans were there. We were discussing about the progress, the growth, serious discussion with tension and stress going on. Our HR manager walks in. He says, everybody come down for cake cutting. So that is why I love HR.
See, so just to clarify, HR is not someone who just applies cake on your face or makes rangolis, okay? We also take care of compliance and all the boring stuff. So it's about time people start respecting all of us,
No, precisely, as a professional, as an HR professional, there are times when we take these jokes in the spirit of it, but I try not to.
No, but it happens in organizations.
I understand that, but and the problem is that when we defend it, we still defend it in almost when we're defensive, instead of really talking about the groundwork that we do behind the actions that people see.
That's true.
In terms of engagement, when we're talking about engagement, you talk about engagement scores and its correlation to performance. That is where HR also has to stop taking a back seat or a back foot and actually come out there and talk in terms of numbers, talk in terms of impact, and stop being apologetic about it. So even, just when we're talking about compliance, law, we think law is a very high standard. Interestingly, law is the bare minimum that you need to do, otherwise there would be repercussions.
Right.
Think about it. That if someone's on the street, don't run them over. That is law. But that is compliance in another form. But it does not prevent you from actually helping a person that you see injured on the road.
Right.
So maternity policy, for instance, that is compliance. But it does not stop you from extending it from 6 months to 9 months and giving that person more flexible working options, which we did. It does not stop you from having an active paternity policy. It does not stop you from extending the same maternity benefits to adoption.
Yeah.
POSH is, by law, it is only, that only a female can, file POSH. But nothing stops you from making it gender neutral within your company. So compliance gives you a bare bone basic framework, which if you don't even comply with that, there would be repercussions. But what you need to build on top of that should just give you a starting ground. And on top of that, you build what is your culture. And your culture is what you are when you are at your bare bone basic best.
Yeah, and I should give this credit to HR teams. The making of culture is so much in the hands of HR. And when HR talks in the meetings, from founder to everybody hears very clearly and very enthusiastically about it.
Hi, my name is Amit. I'm part of Fractal Analytics. I take care of onboarding, operations, and background check. The bigger task that I'm facing right now is how do you keep your system updated, specifically when someone new is joining. And for example, if I've joined, I'm supposed to fill in my education details in the system. Yeah. And also upload a document. Now, how do I authenticate a document versus the data that has been filled in? Because the number of joiners that we have is around 200 per month. Yeah. Right now, it's all manual. So I'm just trying to find out. And that's a real problem that I want to solve for my organization.
As even Mr. Khanduja said, Keka is written on the stage. So we could switch to that. No, but giving you an example of my company, what we do is that Keka has the option to upload the documents. Okay, for all the new starters. So we even issue the appointment letters through Keka. You can acknowledge it by signing it, and only once the documentation is complete would you be able to switch to the next module, which is your payroll, which means your salary details, PF, ESIC, numbers, everything will auto-populate only if you finish your joining formalities. So this is one way in which we do it in our company.
Okay, so you're saying put systems into place to
Absolutely.
read that document. Thanks
Absolutely.
so much.
Actually, Keka is helping us in the same thing.
Yeah, I'll have to speak to my management.
Actually, in our company, we have gone paperless organization because of Keka. Yeah, because everything is online.
So many love letters for us. Lovely. All right.
The good
so
ones.
with that, yeah, absolutely. With that, we thank our speakers for having such an insightful discussion. Can I please request you all to stay on the stage for a little longer? And can we have the facilitation gifts, please? Right, and I would like to take this time to tell everybody of the QR code that is there on the other side of your lanyards. We have the last session of the day. It's a short fireside chat, but with the involvement of all you all present here. Correct? So what we entirely do in a fireside chat is take a topic and debate on it. Right? A fireside chat is literally, in its literal meaning, means of informal discussion. Correct? But we try to take fireside chat and add a twist to it. Make it a debate, right? And with a topic that sparks all of yours attention. So to do that, the first speaker that I would like to call on stage is Sanjay Chandel, the Global Head of People and Culture, Jovio. Can we please have Sanjay on stage? Next up, we have Brilliant SK, the EVP and Chief People Officer of Times Pro. And the moderator of this session would be me. And I've forgotten to give an introduction of myself. I am Dr. Nishat Afzal, and the doctor is not there for a PhD. I'm a maxillofacial surgeon, which is why I'm a doctor, not a PhD. Right. So moving on, let's start our discussion. Yeah, all right. I mean, I believe because of the swivel chairs, it's easier for me to look at everybody present here. Correct? Okay, so the first question is for the audience, right? What is your primary motivator to work? This is the question I had asked in the Chennai conclave as well. So this is something I would like to ask you all too. What's your primary motivator? Yeah, your job role, your job description. Okay, all right. Anyone else? What's your primary motivator to work? Yes, sir. Sorry? Can you please have the mic? Self-confidence is your primary motivator.
Professional growth.
Professional growth. Okay, anyone else who feels same? Yes, please. No, no. They're very clear that there is no professional growth, primary motivation. Yes,
Meet
please.
my colleagues.
To meet your colleagues. Okay. Would you go and meet your colleagues if your salary was say 10,000? Okay. And would you continue doing your your job description as per what it says if you were offered a lesser salary?
But if I get my salary, I would not be motivated. So motivator is the job itself for me. So hence the motivator and not salary. Yeah.
All right. Sanjay, brilliant. What do you think? What is your primary motivator to work?
I think it's a very, very interesting question. For me, primary motivator on Monday and Tuesday is salary. Wednesday, maybe it's the quality of work. Thursday, it is when you're in slightly philosophical mode. You start thinking about, am I achieving my full potential? And Friday, someone said, meeting colleagues.
Okay. I thought it's the weekend vibes and, going for a party or something.
I think it's a question which has so many different nuances. Of course,
Right.
Money is important, but once you achieve that, as gentleman said there, it's a satisfier. It's not a motivator. Then you start looking for some, different things. And
Right.
then there comes a question, am I really achieving my full potential in the role or the work that I'm doing?
Mhm.
Yeah. Eventually, that's probably is the stage, but it keeps differing, as I said.
All right. They're restaurant shops, we can say. Brilliant. What about you?
So all those who said salary is not your motivator, please contact me. We have various opportunities and we'll definitely be looking forward to
Lovely.
having some of you there. But I'll be honest and candid, primary motivator is money. And without money, I don't think everything that we said will ever be possible. While I do agree with what he said, that could be a hygiene factor. We don't want to be the newest father of HR. So I'll stick to being motivated by money. So
All right.
That's that.
I mean, in the previous conclave, somebody told us that their boss was the primary motivator to work.
Was it a male or a female?
It was a male. It was a male, okay? And 3-4 people actually raised their hands, which surprised me a lot. And they were like, no, they are our mentors and whatnot.
Kuch to gadbad hai there.
I thought the same. So anybody who has a similar, thinking that your boss is a primary motivator to work, I have heard that boss is the primary motivator to resign. Never heard of
So
working.
maybe you misheard it. There were two letters before it, which starts with D and E. Demotivator.
Yeah, understood. All right, yeah, I think I totally agree with that. And yes, please.
So I have an uncommon point of view overall. I believe that the team you're working with, the dynamic that you have with the people you're working with, will derive how well you work. If you hate your team, how do you like your work? As simple as that. Right. Secondly, my equation with my colleagues, if I'm constantly not being heard, not responded to, not appreciated enough, I'm going to hate my work. I'm going to hate getting up and going to my job every single morning. Lucky for me, mine is work from home. I love it. But that being said, to me, the most important thing, more than money, is liking the people I work with, having a certain mindset. I'm not saying being similar, but at least aligning, appreciating, and respecting, and being respected.
Right. You spoke about, please sit down. You just spoke about, how it's important for you to have a, good team with you, right? Whom you can collaborate with and share similar thoughts with. But then again, she mentioned that she works from home. I am trying to understand. I mean, I want to know your thoughts on it, that, how does one ensure that despite working from home, you are engaged with your team and you are making sure that, there's no gap between working from office and working from home, like a remote model.
So, I'll share some philosophical perspective on this. Human beings probably know very little about themselves. So when they are faced with different situations, they discover different things about themselves. Yeah, and that also give rise to a lot of theories in organizational behavior that you see. 50 years back, someone said this, then there was a new research. Oh, I think this is proved wrong. Now this is what it is. Yeah. So it is very. I wouldn't say right to disagree with people. I think everyone has their own motivations. Now, humans have two sides, relational side and emotional side, yeah, and other one is the rational side. So for you to be really engaged and to be productively contributing and seeing you really being a part of ecosystem, sometimes you think emotionally, sometimes you think rationally. When you're working from home and it's long time that you haven't seen your friend, you want to meet them, but if you go to office and you have to go through the chores and the trouble of the traffic, then you start liking the other side. When you start liking the other side, that becomes the routine, then you want to go this side. So, change is constant. Human beings keep evolving depending on the circumstances, depending on the needs. They keep discovering new things about themselves. But deep down, everyone wants to feel valued. Everyone wants to contribute whatever they are doing, whether they are remote or whether they are in office. As long as those aspects are taken care of, you are motivated.
Right, but that also brings me to the point of, your leaders. I mean, the way, the amount of, encouragement or appreciation, as you were talking about, the leaders give to their employees, correct? It's important for the appreciation to come from the top, for any person to feel valued, for any person to feel acknowledged and everything. Let's take this in the scope of compliance here, okay? So as an HR, right, we know that HRs are never really appreciated or acknowledged and all of that, but are they given authority? Right? We have spoken in depth about compliance and making a lot of strategies and everything. But will our leaders give us the authority to make those changes? Because they are those minute technical changes which involve the business also. Correct? So how and do in fact leaders give you the authority? So for that matter, I would, with a show of hands, do your leaders, do your employers give you the authority to make compliance changes? Okay, I mean, you are the co-founder, so I don't understand how that functions. All right, I'm assuming the rest of your authority, I mean, your leaders don't give you the authority. So please, everybody, a show of hands, please, because the rest of the members, I'm going to assume that your employees don't give you the authority, and you all are not going to make any compliance changes. Okay, all right, not you, all right, lovely. So, and you're as well. Okay, great. So, brilliant, what do you think about it?
So it's a tricky question, to be very honest, and I'll go back to what Harjeet started with the car. HR literally acts like the traffic policeman. Now, traffic policeman is there to ensure that rules are followed and a fine imposed if broken.
Right.
Now, think about it as a metaphor to say, can HR alone ensure that everyone is compliant? The answer is no. Even though the policeman may or may not have the authority, we still fear.
Right.
The question is not about an authority that is given, it's about a responsibility. I think we should move it into a zone of authority and accountability, and that's when people will start feeling that, okay, this is something which I should do from my own. Not because of fear. Most of the things that we do, even for compliances, as Prasenjit also had shared earlier, is because of the fear. Right? Once you instill fear, then it becomes more, I would say, complicated. If you really want to drive something from within the individual, it doesn't require an authority. It requires accountability, ownership, and responsibility that comes in from each and every individual who's a part of it. So I would say, make a person responsible for that particular activity and give the necessary tools so that the person can be responsible. That could be HR, that may not be HR. And of course, compliance is something which none of us can say, I will not adhere to. That's mine.
All right. I think that, when we're talking about compliances, correct? So do you think HR should act in a decision-making capacity or in an advisory capacity? Because there is a different level at which you can work at, right? I mean, depending again on the authority that is given. But again, as an HR, what do you think? Okay, with a show of hands, tell me whether an HR should work in an advisory capacity or in a decision-making capacity. For advisory capacity? Advisory, not the decision-making. Right.
GCC, for example, are the largest shared service business. Billions of dollars are getting earned. HR shared service is one of the most prominent line of business that they consult and they provide consulting service, which in a very high-level advisory services. So that is already happening in the business.
All right. So your vote is for advisory capacity.
Advisory, decision-making, consulting. Yeah.
Okay, there's a hybrid model there.
Yeah.
What about the, I mean, plainly decision-making capacity? What about it? Anyone else? No? You're literally calling yourself somebody who shouldn't take decisions. All right, makes sense. I mean, brilliant. What do you think about it?
So it's like that movie Dhamal, I think, if I'm not wrong. Javed Jafri is always in front, right? HR is in that position. So I feel I agree with what Prasenjit also said, because there is a lack of awareness, lack of understanding. Every time something happens, people with you will move back and you are in front. So you become responsible for it and you become the authority. But as he rightly said, it's important for us to ensure that they understand why it is required. So you become an advisor, you become a consultant, you become a mentor if required. So that I think there is no black and white answer for this, but the best answer would be jaise ko taisa. Depending on the role, depending on the requirement, depending on the circumstances, you either become a authoritative person, you become an advisor, you become a consultant, or you become a mentor.
Right. Sanjay, what are your thoughts about it?
I think I resonate with most of what is said. It would largely depend on where do you sit in the continuum of your maturity.
Correct.
If you are a HR function which is just starting, your processes are not really very well laid out, and it's still in the old world domain of so-called personnel department plus welfare plus employee keeper of records and something like that. If you're given this responsibility, maybe you have a lot of motivation but you don't have right skills to be able to do it, then you'll have to figure out who does it. But if you look at some functions which have evolved over a period of time and have moved up the value chain, who I think Prasanjit mentioned that when he looks to make a change, he reads every act, every law, understand what it means. He doesn't just rely on the consultants, because sometimes consultants can give you very, very myopic, biased, or depending on what's their stake in it, that kind of views. So no right and wrong answers. It has to be based on depending on where HR is
Right.
in that maturity continuum. If they are already playing a strategic sort of role, this does sit really well with them to kind of spearhead the organization to make those changes.
True. All right. Dr. Anand, you were saying, can we have the mic here, please?
Yeah, from my experience, what I have seen, how the HR is evolving over the time, I think the term which I want to use for HR is the influencer. HR is and has to be influencer in the organization. And if she's not influencer, there is some gap there. So I think decision making may not be always, I could see 3 hands up when it's decision making. But if each of the HR person is an influencer, I think half of the job is already done. So influencer is, I think, the main thing HR's function can be related to.
Right.
They influence you to come for the cake cutting also, right?
See, that is the very appreciative thing, because it's only the HR person who can say, please don't take stress and change the environment of the whole setup of the institution for some time.
Absolutely.
And
I would
it
request,
takes courage.
It takes courage. So next time I would encourage you and your team to join without being pushed or nudged. That will help.
Difficult to do. I mean, again, influence.
It's possible.
If you can influence, if HRs can influence, see, the thing is, there's always top of the mind, and I have read somewhere, if HR understands business and HR understands revenue model and business model, they will be more appreciated. And there is a gap there always.
Right.
So if you see HR is functioning in the board, everybody is talking about finance, HR shows lowest interest that time. I have seen many companies like that, right? But if HR is also interested in that thing, then people start accepting HR more and influences start coming more. I mean, just my personal observations and some research I have done on HR functions.
Right. I think, that definitely makes a valid point. But then, yes, sir. Can we have the mic over here?
So I just want to coin one of the thing which just crossed my mind, that it should be a cultural shift between a compliance and a complete alliance. Because when you say compliance, it is forced. When you say complete alliance, it is something which you can embrace.
More like a voluntary thing.
Voluntary thing. So that cultural shift is required.
But I think, again, it has to come from the top. Any and every culture change also has to come from the top. But when in terms of compliance, correct, we do understand that HRs and CEOs will disagree on certain aspects, correct? So have you all in your 10 years as an HR have had disagreements with the CEO on compliances? Has that ever happened? Where cost is involved? The mic is here.
Thank you.
Please.
So I'll go back to what I was saying earlier, right? It's a misnomer these days that HR is only, apologies, but only an influencer or somebody who will implement what's been asked. I have experienced it. I have seen it in multiple organizations. HR is part of the board, number one. Number two, HR pretty much contributes to the financial discussions and are very, very adept. For me or my HR colleague, Sanjay is sitting here. I have seen him in action. So there are a lot of people who are adept at what they do. Coming to compliance, what will the people do? What will be the C-suite do if you implementing certain compliance changes or you changing certain things? They will ask for a relevance. Somebody said cost. Is it too bad for the employees? Is it too bad for my external agencies or whatever it may be? But when you bring down the context and correlate it with the context, I don't think I have seen anybody declining saying that, no, we shouldn't do that, right? It is, please
Drilling
understand,
down the
yeah,
context
please
of it.
understand, HR today is not what it used to be 20 years back. Today, this fraternity, if it is not getting heard, too bad for the organization. But any organization you've got almost about 150, 200 people in this, I'm sure represented by at least about 40, 50 organizations. You take a dipstick, and I would be pleasantly surprised if anybody tells you that people are not listening to me.
All right. I mean, on that note, I would just like to take up Sanjay's point as well. And then, all right, no, I just wanted to understand the people who had raised their hands earlier and told that their leaders had disagreed when they spoke about the compliance, changes. True, again, comes down to the cost effectiveness of it. But as Mr. Das was mentioning, the right context setting will do the trick for you, right? So how many of y'all have actually tried drilling down the context to your employers and made sure that they have agreed on it? First they had disagreed and then they agreed, right? And can anybody give me an example of what had happened? Drishti, if you may go ahead with you.
So actually, we had a lot of contract employees currently, joining our company, and initially they were disagreeing on having PF and ESIC. So we were having a lot of trouble of, the minimum salary is getting deducted, and if we would not have that, we would have extra amount of salary with us, and we would decide what we have to do with that kind of money. So we had to go down, make them understand that how this works, how this will benefit you in the long run, and how it will go around. So it took 2-3 months, but then it has settled down, and we have a very good process of, PF and ESIC going down through the contract employees. So that is how I think we have benefited with it.
Lovely. All right. I mean, Sanjay, what do you think about it?
Having had a privilege of working with many CEOs in startup as well as multinational companies, I haven't come across a CEO who would say no. I have come across with CEOs who are going to be extremely demanding. They want to do things in a very cost-effective, time-bound, result-oriented manner. And for many a times that probably is viewed as, oh, they are not interested. No, that's not the case. Yeah. Of course, there may be some examples where people outrightly don't want to comply, yeah, but I would want to challenge their moral compass. Why are you in business if you cannot give minimum wages that employee deserves? Simple as that. I don't think it's such a big deal. Yeah, and if you think it's a big deal, there is a problem in the way you are looking at your business. I think you need to kind of question. So I think there was a gentleman who made a very, very good point. Compliance is just bare minimum. Then comes business ethics. Then comes your morality. From what standpoint are you looking at your business? Yeah, if you're looking at business only from the standpoint of making money and sucking that extra buck from someone's legitimate share, I don't think you're going to be there. Forget about compliance. That company is not going to exist sooner or later. Yeah. So I don't know where did I start, and now I've lost the plot. But
All right. On that note, I have a question for the audience based on what Sanjay was just mentioning. He said that a lot of CEOs are very demanding. Correct. So have you had an experience where your CEO was very demanding in terms of compliances? Okay. And anywhere the CEOs were not demanding, they are pretty cool. All right. Please. I mean, we are not sending your video to your CEO. So, but. Anyway, I'm glad you support your CEO. All right.
So not only my CEO, but my MD, my chairman, everyone is very much demanding. So if they want something, they want that, and in fact, our group CHRO, everyone, they are on toes every time, So, like I'll tell you, so we are in an expansion mode, and we are planning to hire almost 700, 800 people in company.
Right.
And my CEO is expecting that 700, 800 people to be onboarded in 6-month timeline. Do you think it's possible?
I mean, the HRs are here, they can say the word. Is that possible? Yes. It is.
So as an point, somewhere I feel as an HR, we are missing a point. As an citizen of this country, we have fundamental rights. So as an labor of this country, this compliance word is a fundamental right itself. All the laws are clearly defined. If you see the overall working condition, it is already defined by the Shop and Establishment Act of each and every state out there, which is clear and bold. If you talk about the female working conditions, most of the states, around 12 to 15 states, it has a clear guidelines why female should work in night shift and what are the prerequisites. You only need to take care, and that becomes the fundamental right of that particular female, taking care of everything, right from the maternity act, the crèche, and all those kind of stuff. When it comes to all these basic kind of law, it is only the HR who should be held responsible and accountable. When you hire someone, when you onboard someone, you have to ensure that within those 48 hours, you need to comply with at least the basic law, which is giving them the offer letter, appointment letter. Why? Because there is a clarity of his job in that offer letter, appointment letter. Point number 2, within 48 hours, ESIC has to be enrolled. Will anyone disagree with me here who works in the contract labor market? Because on the first day itself, if the guy faces any problems while coming on job, if he faces any accident, who should be held responsible? So if he's enrolled, then there is a solution to it. So I feel it is compliance itself is a fundamental kind of a right to each and every employer, whether we call it as white collar employee or blue collar employee, doesn't have any legal entities out here. It is purely the on-roll employees, the full-time fixed-term contract employees, and only the contract labor. And for that, the basic laws here in the state of Maharashtra and most of the states in India, you comply with the Shop and Establishment, you are safe. You comply with the CLRA Act, you are saved. Simple. Thank you.
All right. Brilliant. What are your thoughts about this intense pointers?
So I think, we need to look at it from a very different lens, especially when it comes to business. What happens is, for them, it's all about speed. It's all about how quickly you can get it done. The problem, and I would slightly disagree, HR is not disconnected from the business. HR is clued in, but because HR comes up with a speed breaker saying compliance, HR comes up with a speed breaker saying that you cannot employ these kind of people for these many days, you need to give them a break, you need to have these conditions. The business starts to believe that isko main bulaunga na, ye road dal dega, ye meko karne nahi dega. And that is the problem.
Right.
It's not that HR is not glued to business. HR is glued to business. HR is foot deep into the business much more than probably the marketing guy. Sorry to say this, but
No worries.
Yeah, I would say it's more than heart, it's heart and brain. Because we also think. We just don't say कि हाँ यार ये होना चाहिए. We think and we have to start creating awareness. Because what happens is at 36,000 feet, they may not be aware of what is that one spot. It could be a pond, it could be a lake, it could be a river, or it could be a sea. It's our responsibility as HR professionals to make sure that we give them the pros and cons and tell them that iske bina kaam nahi hoga. In one of the organizations, just sharing, my CMD wanted a dream, follow the sun, which meant 24/7 working. And we used to be working 9 to 5 role. Now moving from that to a shift requires so many compliances, so many check boxes that they were not aware. And they wanted to launch it. 6 months was still okay. They wanted to do it in 3 months. And it was impossible.
I mean, this is one step ahead of Narayan Murthy then.
I don't want to get into that one. No, I'm saying it's all about making them aware that there are things which you can do, things which you cannot do. And when you tell them what is the implication for the organization, for the individual, and directors are liable for it, that's when, I can't use that word here, but you can understand what happens to them.
Right,
So only one point to make it here. Okay, both of them, they have a high business desire and high expectation. जल्दी में धंधा करना है इनको.
आपको नहीं करना है.
Madam, it has to be time bound. Again, the compliances will come into picture. You are keeping contract laborers, but if it's an continue kind of a job role, you cannot keep contract laborers. You have to onboard them as on roles. Again, anyone who disagrees?
शांत गदाधारी भीम शांत.
वो आ रही है भावना है.
आप लोग QR कोड स्कैन कर लो, बहुत ही अच्छा WhatsApp ग्रुप है.
Fantastic.
53 मेंबर्स अभी तक एक्टिव है और आ जाएंगे. But seriously, it's a good topic to have conversations on.
No, but she only said the contact. It has to be a debatable, and जब तक वो charge नहीं रहेगा.
And you are my favorite audience member. So
Okay.
thank you for that.
So taking this opportunity, I would request and appeal all of you, please join me. Give them big round of applause for Keka. ये थोड़ा hit में ही, climax में ही खत्म होना चाहिए.
Royalty distribute कर लिया अभी तूने.
आ जाइए सर, साथ में कर लेंगे. Not a problem. Thank you so
I think
much.
the last question which we have for Sanjay and Brilliant both is that there are a lot of demands, as you said, coming in from the CEO, but there are a lot of changing regulatory laws also. So how does an HR balance these two? Because the CEO won't understand. They'll be like, आते रहेंगे, मतलब whatever. He'll not get the crux of it. But you have to make him understand. So how do you balance that?
I think it is about setting expectations, right? So there is so much change happening in the ecosystem, and compliance is no different. It is not untouched with those changes. Skills are getting obsolete. Yeah, industries are getting wiped out overnight.
Right.
New jobs are getting created. New technologies are coming and completely eliminating certain job families. So in that context, if CEO is worried about a new compliance change that he's not able to implement, I think he's not fit to be a CEO. I'm sorry, with all due respect to them. We got to be agile. But it is HR's responsibility, moral, ethical, as well as so-called professional responsibility to start preparing ground for what's to come. Yeah, so that they know that these are the things, these are the changes which could hit us. It might impact our expansion plans, or we got to find money, or we might to do things differently. I think it's a part of their professional responsibility. And to the point that gentleman you mentioned, HR is changing. Yeah, I made a conscious decision after 18 years been in operation to move to HR. I have done strategy, I have done operation, I have done L&D, I have done account management. I would not claim that I am more smart than anyone else, but I understand business as well as anyone sitting on the boardroom. Yeah, and this is happening not just with me. I can give you plenty of such examples from my colleagues who are transitioning from so-called main business to HR, because HR is going to define your company's success in years to come. Why I say so? Everything else can be either automated or could be offshore. You can't offshore company's culture, company's ethos. Eventually, that is going to be the main so-called responsibility for HR. Even clients, even the compliance will eventually get offshore. They're going to be good people who are going to do it.
Right.
Coming back to the last point, it is our responsibility to keep CEOs prepared for what's to come, and it is CEO's responsibility also equally to know what's happening in the market. It's a teamwork, it's a collaboration.
Right. Brilliant. Any ending thoughts on that?
ज्ञान यहाँ पे मैं पहले आया था तो चाय मुझे पहले देना. चाय मैंने मांगी थी तो चाय मैं ही पीऊँगा. If you have seen काला पानी and that scene between Shatrughan Sinha, Amitabh Bachchan on a cup of tea, that's exactly what happens when the business or the CEO says ये करना ही है, short time period. And then Shatrughan Sinha is the compliance officer saying that I was here first, as a compliance you need to do this. That is where we come in as Shashi Kapoor. Kya bhai, kaise help kare? We need to diffuse the situation. We need to make sure that both are at a level of understanding, as we call in jargon, on the same page. Right? The biggest problem today is we are in a hurry. Everyone wants instant profits, instant business. They are not willing to invest time, efforts, or even look at compliance. Compliance for them is probably the last thing on their mind. Only when everything is done, building ban jayega, bole, lekin foundation to khoda hi nahi. That's how we as HR professionals need to start relooking at what we need to do. Should we wait or should we be proactively talking about this? The first instance that there is a conversation on building a new business, the first thing that we should do is put across the checklist saying ye cheez karni hai, uske baad hi hoga. Unfortunately, what happens is, because of what he also mentioned, HR is not included, not because of their competencies, but by choice. Yaar, ye to road dalne wala hai. So we need to make sure that if you don't get the foot in the door, you break the door, get yourself inside and say, this will not happen. You need to be seen as equal as the CFO in the organization. And I'll tell you something which has been bothering me a lot for a lot of time now. If you look at the Companies Act, if you see the KMPs, it's the company secretary, the CFO, and the CEO. HR is nowhere there. Right? No one cares about HR. अगर तुमने foundation ही वैसा बना दिया है, so I think we need to create that position for HR from a statutory compliance perspective to say HR का गला भी पकड़ने वाले हैं. And that is what will help us achieve, I would say, a breakthrough in helping the business and the CEOs understand that compliance is a non-negotiable item on the list.
Right. I mean, with the topic of it being non-negotiable, I understand there are a lot of questions and thoughts that you want to share with us. But in lieu of the time, as it's already 10, I understand all of you all have to have your dinner and go back home. So we are ending the session here. And thank you so much, Sanjay and Brilliant, for being such wonderful speakers. And a huge round of applause for the audience for being so lovely, for being so engaging, despite the clock striking 10. So thank you, everybody. We'll continue on WhatsApp.
No,
yes.
we can actually continue it on Republic channel also. Great debate.
Exactly. But I refuse to be that, reporter there. But yeah, things being said, thank you so much for being such a lovely audience. And with the felicitation, we'll end the session here. And yeah, looking forward to seeing all of you all very active on the WhatsApp group again. Thank you so much. And the dinner is being served outside. Thanks again, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah, and one last point, that there is a feedback form that will be sent to your email boxes. So all your love letters to Keka are most welcome over there. All right. Thank you again, everyone.